Hi, this is Aziz Khan, and today in this video we will see that for a project, who are the stakeholders, what is the process of identification, and why it is necessary, and why, if we don't do it properly, then what kind of issues we can go in. At the end, I should give you a personal example as well about this same thing, that why we need to identify stakeholders. So let's start with our normal PMI standard. So the PMI, the PM grid, the people who are watching this series from the start, they know there is a PM grid in which we have project management process groups and knowledge areas. So we can say that it's the last knowledge area, project stakeholder management. This knowledge area has four process, each process in one of the process groups. The last group, the closing group, does not have exactly a process, but as I told you many a times before as well, that basically this PMBOK is a framework, it's a kind of guideline, and whatever is written in it is, you can say that, a good practice or a minimum practice. It does not mean that in each and every circumstances we cannot go above and beyond, or we cannot reduce. We can either reduce these requirements as well, we can reduce it, or we can enhance it as well. So even though PMBOK don't ask us to identify stakeholders in the closing group, because it seems quite logical as well that if you are closing, then why you are looking for stakeholders at this time. But practically speaking, in a practical way, there is no time when you can stop identify stakeholder process. This process is part of initiating process. It's done in initiating. If you remember, in initiating we have only two processes. One is to initiate the project we need a project charter, and the other process is identify stakeholders. So this is the second process in initiating, or it's a second process of the only two processes of initiating process group to identify stakeholders. But practically speaking, this process does not happen in the initiating process group only, and also because of the agile technology, because of this too much agile thing in project management, because now project management is not done as something on as is basis. There are some projects which are too mature that you can always run those processes very easily. Those projects are not run in, you can say that, they are being run too many times. So the people who are running those projects, they can very easily run the project again. But this thing is, you can say that it is diminishing now. Now there are a lot of times you will find very small projects and very short duration projects, and very different projects also, because of the changing time. We are moving from a normal, you can say that, from a normal scenario to a very different scenarios. Like for example, right now we are going through this pandemic. This pandemic is changing a lot of things. So because of this change, even the project management processes or project management in itself is also already changing. And because of this too much change, because if you are going through a project and then there, for example, there's a big change. Just we take this corona as an example. For example, you are running a project and you are in the execution of it. So planning, initiation, everything was done. Now, because of this corona, you again need to identify more stakeholders because, for example, if it was a telecom project and you had to just go and install a site, so you were just going installing a site, but suddenly you came to know that now you cannot leave right just like that. I mean, you have to take permission from the deputy commissioner of the area that if you can do a movement, if the area is sealed or locked or there's a lockdown situation, the transport is running or not, this and that. If there's a new patient identified from the same area, then the whole area is locked now. So these kind of things, I mean, it makes you that you should identify the new stakeholders in a project now. So let's see that how we can basically identify a stakeholder. So PMI gives us, as usual, I mean, for everything they give us uh, some inputs, some outputs, and some tools and techniques. So if you want to identify stakeholders, your first input is the project charter because the charter also identifies major stakeholders. At least from the charter, you know that who is giving you the charter. So that person who is the owner of the project, he is the first stakeholder. Then if a team is defined, then your team is your next stakeholder. So in the same way, I mean, maybe some key stakeholders are defined in the charter. Then you have to see the business document like the business case. That okay, what is the business case? Why we are doing it? So for example, if there's a project, as I give an example of a telecom project, if there's a project of installing sites, then you need to take approval from the site design team. You need to take approval from for the plans. You need to take approval for the budget. So you need to have a business case, and as based on that business case, you need to identify further stakeholders. Then you need to have the benefits management plan that okay, this project, what kind of benefits it will be giving to which people. So those people, if there are any, they are also become the stakeholders because they are the end user kind of person or they are the receivers of the benefits. Because you know everything that you get, every document and every indication or every idea that you get for a project, you need to identify stakeholders from that because maybe those people have some effect on your project. So going further, you need the project management plan. In the whole project management plan, you need to know the communication management plan and stakeholder engagement or management plan. So from the communication management plan, you will know that okay, as per this project, these number of people needs to be informed about the project statuses or whatever is given in the plan. So based on that requirement, those people also become a stakeholder of your project. Then from the stakeholder management plan that you will develop by yourself, that management plan also will give you that okay, who are the stakeholders and what kind of uh, powers they have. You know, when you will identify the stakeholders, you will need to identify basically two or three kind of things about the stakeholders. Not only identification is required, you need to identify that who is the stakeholder, what kind of effect or what kind of powers he has on the project, and how he has to be satisfied. I mean, how you need to communicate with them. This is at least the three minimum things that you need to know about each stakeholder of your project. Also, you will have project documents like the change log, the issue log, the requirement documentation, Then you can see for the agreements, if there are some agreements part of projects. If for example the project needs some right of way, there are some right of way agreements, or you need to involve some third parties, there are some agreements being done with some other vendors. So those vendors also become your stakeholders. So then your enterprise environmental factor and your organizational process assets. These two things are the final thing to tell you exactly that, for example, if you want to do something, if you want to do, for example, if you want to have new procurement, for example, you want to give some part of project to some subcontractor, then what is the process? Who should approve it? Who should make the plan? Who should make the agreement? Who should make the purchase order? Who should approve the purchase order? So these kind of all information you need to gather initially, and then based on this, you need to identify all the stakeholders. And now, for example, you go through all of these inputs. So you will apply your expert judgment first of all, because we believe that every project manager, he should have done some previous projects as well. He should have some personal idea that how projects are run. So based on that, he should have his own judgment as well. Then you should do some further data gathering. This can be based on questionnaire or surveys, or you can have just a brainstorming with your team. That, for example, if you want to run a big project in some area and you need, for example, that all of the residents of that area are your stakeholder, and you need some feedback from them. So you that feedback you can only get through some questionnaire or surveys, and then you can brainstorm with your team and you can gather further data. Now this whole data should needs to be analyzed. That okay, you get a data about your stakeholders. Now you need to analyze that data. That okay, this is analysis. In this stakeholder analysis, you should uh, rank the stakeholders. Okay, which stakeholder should be given a kind of high priority, who is more influential, who is less influential, what kind of requirement who just needs some information, who is a approver as well, who should make a lot of noise, for example. These kind of things also should be known beforehand, that who should make a trouble, how you should deal with him, how you can uh, try that he should not make a lot of troubles for you. So then you should represent this data in some good form, so that you can show it to your management, or you can make it a kind of stakeholder report or register. So you need data representation, and for all of this, you need a lot of meetings as well, because it is better that whoever stakeholder you identify, you try to meet him somehow, not basic, maybe not directly, maybe not you, maybe some of your team member, maybe on a call, or maybe if it depends on what kind of project you are running, but maybe meeting if you have a project which has very, you can say that not a lot of stakeholders, only two, three, four stakeholders, then it's better that you at least get one meeting with all the stakeholders, so that you can at least discuss 3 points with them. Number one is that what they think about your project, because sometimes what happens is that you are a project manager and you are running a project, but maybe because it's all written in plain English, but still we have a different idea, or we have a different uh, everyone has his own perspective. So maybe we all of us we read a single line, but all of us we make a different meaning of that sentence. So you need to know that what the stakeholder thinks about the project. Then you need to ask him that what he feels is the outcome of the project, because we know that the project charter has very clearly written the requirements, but you can say that you should cross check with the stakeholder that if he and you are on the same page or not. And the last and the most important thing is that you should know that what is the success criteria of the project in the mind of your stakeholders, because this is I have seen, or I have experienced that this is something which makes a lot of difficulties for a project manager. Sometimes personally you think that maybe the delivery of the deliverables is whatever is exactly needed, but when you went to the stakeholders and you talk to him, maybe he will say that he's some of them, not all of them maybe, but some of them, maybe he say that they will say that we are not even concerned about deliverables. I mean, deliverables are not our part of job, we are concerned with something else. So that is why identification of all the stakeholders and getting these three things very simply put with them, that what he thinks about the project, what he thinks about the deliverables of the project, and what he thinks about the success criteria of the project. Because if these three things are very early detected and they are put very straightforward, simple words at the start of the project, then you can say that it's almost impossible now to fail this project. I mean, a bigger risk, if there is some big risk and that risk is triggered, then that risk can make some problems. Otherwise, this project should go very fine. But what happens generally is that these three questions are not uh, asked in the start. They are generally asked in a very later time when some things are already done. So then either you need to do a lot of changes, or you need to live with it, or you just deliver the project with some stakeholders not happy. So you cannot easily call it either a failure or a success. So the output of these inputs and the application of tools and techniques, then we go to the output. The output is basically one that we are more concerned of, because our main topic is who are stakeholders. So the output is stakeholder register. The stakeholder register can take any form. It can be a simple Excel sheet with 3-4 columns and a list of stakeholders, where then you put that, okay, this is stakeholder number one, how much influence he has on the project, what is his position, he is approver, he should be only informed, and he should be only uh, or he should be a kind of in both of the things or whatever. So, and the last thing should be that how you should be communicating with him. What are his requirements from the project, and how those requirements are going to be met. And it's better that this register is always maintained with the high priority stakeholders on the top, because we know that a lot of time things can go miss. So if you miss something, then you should be missing it from the low priority, even though practically you should not miss anything. You should not miss any project stakeholder. and you should not miss any information about him, and you should not miss him because any stakeholder can make at least he can dent your reputation, if not something else. I mean, for example, you did a very good project and the project went very well and everyone was happy, but you missed one non-key stakeholder, and that also by mistake. You did not want to miss him, but the least he will do is that wherever he will find some time or some way, he will talk negative about you, that this person, he did a project and he don't know how to do project, he did not manage things properly. So even though you should have done everything for the project, but just missing one small stakeholder can at least ruin your reputation on the project. So for a good project holder, everything is important. If you read, like I have said in many of my old videos as well, that if you read PMI, PMBOK, you will feel that a project manager is a kind of Superman kind of thing. I mean, he can do a lot of tasks at the same time. So, stakeholder engagement and management is also one of the very key things, because whatever PMI has mentioned as a knowledge area, it's a key thing that a project manager has to deliver. So one output is your stakeholder register. Then there are change requests. Now one may ask that, I mean, it is a stand identify stakeholders. I mean, what kind of change request it has? It should not have any change request. And this is initially logically it looks right as well. I mean that what a change request has to do with identify stakeholders. But for example, if you are running a project and during the project execution, you came to know that there was some very influential project stakeholder who was missed. And when you added him and you went to him and you talked to him, he asked, he made up some of the new requirements, which were not exactly new, I mean, but maybe he asked that I should be added in this kind of communication. So based on his requirement, you will need to update the communication plan. So when you update communication plan, you need a change request for that. Even though I know that in most of the projects around the world, uh, this kind of requirement is not always associated with a change request, but as per the guidelines, as per the normal guidelines, if you are going to make any change in a project plan, even if it is so minute, it should be recorded against a change request so that everyone knows that when, why, and how it was done. So, and for example, I gave a very small example, but for example, this is a very influential stakeholder and he brings some major change, and that change has a time and schedule and everything. So you have to put a big CR and you put a change request and you change everything of the project. So stakeholder identification can mean change requests as well. Not in all cases, or maybe in a very few cases, but if you are identifying a very key stakeholder at a later time, you should pay some price for it. So you need to update project management plan. This I already told you, maybe your requirement management plan, communication management plan, risk management plan, stakeholder engagement plan, because this plan is very obvious. If you identify one more stakeholder, you need to change this plan. Now, because of this new stakeholder, there may be a new risk as well. Communication plan must be changed because this new stakeholder should need some communication as well. And if he's very influencing, or if he has big powers on the project, maybe he will, because this is also I can say it on my personal example that If you fail to identify a key stakeholder in the start, then he must add something. This is for sure. Maybe if you identify him in the start and you tell him that this is the start, I mean, if you want to add something, maybe he will say, no, if you have done everything, then everything should be fine. But if he came to know that he has been added a bit later, then he must add something because of some obvious reasons that I should not, I mean, which you all should not know it very simply. So project documents should also be updated: assumption log, issue log, and risk register. So I mean, if you went through this, then you should be ready to uh, get these inputs, use these tools and techniques, and you will have these outputs. So one thing that I said in that start as well, and that this is a part of initiating group because this logically fits here, but technically it is everywhere. You should be a project manager, should always be keeping an eye on the stakeholders, because if he misses one, then it can be very fatal for the project as well. So I hope you understand this project management PMBOK part of it. So let's see the word project, the word stakeholder or stakeholders. You can find it very easily in PM Box 6. You can find this word maybe more than 100 times, but I have just picked three statements which I feel that a project manager should always keep in mind, at least these three statements about a stakeholder. The statement one, the project stakeholder management includes the processes required to identify the people, groups, or organizations that could impact or be impacted by a project. So this is the first part of identification, that the stakeholder management should have a process. By this process, you should be able to identify now what kind of things can be a stakeholder. These things could be organizations or groups or peoples. So it's not like that your stakeholder is a person only. The stakeholder could be a person, it could be a group, or it could be an organization. And now this thing is also very important to understand, that either they could impact your project or they could be impacted by the project. So it's not that you find only the people who can make an impact. I mean, you should find the people who could be impacted. Just for example, if you have been given a project of making a road, so you need to identify the people who may be impacted when you are building that road. Maybe some person's home is very near to it, and because of when you are building this road, he may not be able to come out of his home, so you need to inform him that at this day, this time, I will be making this road, so you need to take care. Because otherwise, if you don't take care, you don't inform him, and maybe he got hurt because of any reason, he can very easily go to court and he can sue you, and he can say that this thing was done at my home and I was not identified, I was not informed. So it's not only that the people who can make an impact, but the people who could be impacted, they are also the stakeholders. And then what you need to do is that you need to analyze stakeholder expectations and their impact on the project. So you need to identify not only the impact that they can make, but also what is their expectations from the project. But one thing is very simple, that when you are going through this phase, that is why we say in that normal project charter, you should have a list of items which are part of the project, and very clear list of items which are not part of the project, because this stakeholder expectations generally, it if it is not managed properly, it brings a lot of scope creep in your project. So you should know that what is in the project and what is out of the project. So this will help you to develop appropriate management strategy, effectively engaging stakeholders in project decision and execution. So this is the nutshell. This is what you need to do in the stakeholder management. So in identification, what is their impact, what is the requirement, and how they will be dealt. Now this is one of the key. I use this statement in one of my other a video as well, in which I had discussed that why project fail or can project fail. So the ability of the project manager and team to correctly identify and engage all of the stakeholders in an appropriate way can mean the difference between project success and failure. This is, I think, very strong message, and I fully endorse this message, and I'm with this message that if a project manager and his team can correctly identify and engage the stakeholders, then this can be a key to your success. All other things are, you can say that, manageable. If you are going above cost, you are going below cost, you are going above schedule, you are going below schedule, you are going above quality, you are going below quality. All of these things could be managed if you are managing the stakeholders very, very properly. So also part of this project documentation is the stakeholder register, so which we discussed already as well. But this register is used to identify stakeholders who can provide information on the requirement. It also captures requirement and expectations that stakeholders have for the project. So as I told in the previous as well, that this stakeholder register, it could be a kind of sheet where you add that what are the stakeholders and what kind of requirements they have. So stakeholder register should have the stakeholders listed, their expectations, their requirements, and how you will deal with them. So let's come to one more aspect of this. This is a very beautiful picture made by PMI in their book. So this is the example of a project manager's sphere of influence. So this is, for example, this is a project manager. He has the highest influence on himself, which is very simple thing. But the second highest influence he has, or his influence is greater on the project team and the managers and the resource managers. So he has some influence on them, maybe a bit more on the project team, but somehow, if it is not his own team, if it is a team which he has got through resource managers, then even this team is not under his direct influence. But if this is his own team, then it has more influence of him. But nevertheless, this is a place where he has a bit more influence. And then these people, like sponsors, governing bodies, steering committees, then PMOs, they are under a bit lower influence than these people, because these people basically, they are also, you can say, they are a bit higher management as well. I mean, they have their own powers, and they have their own way of understanding things, and they understand things from their own perspective more than your perspective. You cannot influence these people easily. You can influence the project team more easily. I mean, you can give some kind of, maybe some lollipops to them as well. But these people, because they are, you can say that they are the owners of the project. So they, because they have more control, so they are generally more out of your influence, but still you can influence them, because you are the project manager. If you will show them something which is concrete and which has a big in a big impact, then they have to listen to you. But in the last of the sphere, the sphere with the most lesser of the influence comes stakeholders, because stakeholders is generally a very general term, because for example your project team is also your stakeholder, so your stakeholders is basically in these two spheres as well. So stakeholders are not only just in this sphere, but stakeholders are all of these people who are written here, they are a kind of a stakeholder as well. But this stakeholders word, this is a kind of very general or very vague statement. So these are the kind of stakeholders that are in the less influence of you. So, and if you are running a big project, a project which has some effect on society as well, for example, you are building a, if you need to build a building in the middle of the city, then you know that even every passerby is your stakeholders. Everyone who is passing near to your construction site become the temporary stakeholders, because if anything happens to you, anything happens to him while he's passing by, or if he did anything, for example, if he trespasses, or if he for example, if he steals anything, and he can also become a stakeholder in your project. So stakeholder is not a term which can be limited to any few people. It depends a lot on your circumstances. And one thing for sure is that if you can identify your stakeholders properly and you manage them properly, then your project is usually a big success. So at the end, as I told you, I will try to give one personal example. Like I am telling on many of the other forums, like I'm building this website. So this is telecomlearner.com, and I'm also uploading my videos on this YouTube channel that you are currently watching. So these, both of these two projects, these are my personal projects. These are not a project given to me by any, through any charter or by someone. It's a pure personal project. I'm just doing it to satisfy myself. Personally, if I tell you that, then I can say that I'm in, or I can boast that I'm in. There is no stakeholder of this project. But if I tell you frankly, and I tell you honestly, I have millions and billions of stakeholders in this project, because, for example, I'm making this video, and for example, you are watching this video. So you became a stakeholder of my project, because now your liking or disliking of this video can have an impact on this video, and it can have impact on my channel. And if you are watching, for example, if you are going through my website and you like it or you don't like it, you spend more time on it, you spend less time on it. So in this way, it makes you a biggest stakeholder. Whatever I'm doing, basically to satisfy myself, I'm doing it to satisfy the watchers as well. And the other thing is that, for example, not, I mean, you are not the only one who is the stakeholder. For example, I'm putting these videos on my YouTube channel. So YouTube also become a stakeholder in my project, because YouTube has a community guidelines. So community guidelines became a document for my project. And if I don't follow the community guidelines, YouTube can, sometimes they can remove my videos, or they can put some penalties on me, or even they can remove my whole account as well. So for example, like I was putting very different topics of videos. So once I put a video on corona, and that video was removed by YouTube. So I mean, I was not making this video for YouTube, or I was not making it for anyone. I mean, I was just making it for myself. But still, when you put it on social media, if you put it on public, then the public became the stakeholder. So this is how you need to identify, and then you need to manage, and you need to, for example, whenever I make a video, I try to get people's feedback somehow. I mean, a lot of people that don't provide feedback that easily. But whatever feedback I get, I try to use that feedback to enhance my further projects in whatever way is easy for me or possible for me. So by giving this example to you about my website and my YouTube channel, I just wanted to tell you that even for some projects that we personally feel that there may be no stakeholder of the project, those projects also have very big, very high number and too many stakeholders. So you can easily imagine through this example that how much mistakes we may be doing when we are identifying the stakeholders, because what I have personally seen that because of the agile nature of the projects as well, I told you that a lot of projects right now in the current scenario, these are very small duration projects and they don't have, for example, if you have a project for 2 or 3 days, now you cannot spend a whole year to identify the stakeholders in the project. The project is only for 2 3 days. But if you miss any very high potential stakeholders, even if it was a 1 hour project, this can cost you a lot. For example, if you had a project and the project was, again, if you go again to the same telecom domain, you had a project and you just, as a project, you just need to go to a site and install a very small thing. And while entering the site, you find that there is the site guard is not there and no one is there to open the site for you and you are in a hurry, and then you try to trespass and you jump over the wall and someone watches you and he makes your complaint and then the police came. Just to give you an example that if you don't identify the stakeholders and engage them properly, if you are going to a site even for a 5 minute job, you need to identify the guard and take his number, call him and make sure that he is available before you reach there. Otherwise, it can, if it goes to the worst side, it can be anything for you. So this is how project in projects stakeholder identification is too much necessary. Their expectations should be well known and well written, and it is better that they are documented and signed, at least from the stakeholders that you are able to identify. And how they should be managed, mostly for the communication management, because approval, you should always manage the approvers because they should be approving. But sometimes what happens is that you manage the approvers, but you don't manage the people who should be informed, and this also becomes a problem. And sometimes, as I was giving in the start, that sometimes what happens is that you're, even for example, you're closing a project, and while closing the project, you're talking to procurement, and you came to know that there was some, for example, some NOC was required, even though you have completed the whole project, but because the NOC not is not obtained, so your project procurement should stop because this is a legal document, and without that document, your project will never be closed. So even though you have completed everything, you have delivered everything, you are in the last part of you are in the closing of project. Even at that time, a stakeholder could be identified, and that stakeholder can take all of your project on a standstill. So your project will remain in that state until you don't get the required document and submit the document, and then your project should be closed. So identify stakeholder is a job which should be running all the times. You should always be finding the stakeholders and you should be taking full care of them. But don't try to gold plate, because stakeholders can be gold plated as well. Gold plating is not, um, PMI don't support gold plating, because gold plating generally it costs, and that cost has to be managed from somewhere. So that's why it is never required, and it can lead you to scope creep as well. So your project scope should be well written, and I hope all of this was a good information for you, and you should have learned something about stakeholders. And do comment on my video, and if you want to learn any specific thing, then you can write to me. I can prioritize it, and I can add it in my videos. So see you with my next video. Goodbye.